Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Nurturing Minds session. I'm Dr. Blanka Kellermayer, neuroscientist, mother of two, and peaceful parenting coach at Dr. Blanka Peaceful Parenting. I help busy parents to get their kids to cooperate for a more harmonious home. I'm so excited for today's session, and we have Sonali here. Sonali, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you, Blanka. I'm Dr. Sonali Dasgupta, a research scientist and educator, mentor to talented teenagers, and founder of the STEM Monsters Education platform. We work with schools to implement hands-on STEM programs that foster interdisciplinary innovation by focusing on design thinking and a first principle approach to learning. Welcome to Nurturing Minds, a science-driven approach to parenting and education. In this monthly series, we dive deep into topics that matter most when it comes to raising and educating our children. In each session, we provide practical science-backed strategies to help our kids thrive as they go through the journey of being a child to a young adult and eventually responsible adults of the society. We will cover topics ranging from limiting screen time without conflict to overcoming the fear of failure to setting boundaries for success. So, Blanka, would you like to introduce today's topic?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Sonali, for the introduction. So today we're diving into a topic that's deeply rooted in both parenting and education, but is often misunderstood. And this is punishment. So we're going to be talking about what punishment is, the different forms of punishment, both in the home and in the classroom setting, and how it impacts our kids. And we'll also explore why punishment doesn't address the deeper needs behind a child's behavior, how it can damage the parent-child or the teacher-student relationship. And we'll also share some practical strategies based on connection and that nurture intrinsic motivation, so we can ultimately help our kids learn to make good choices independently and with confidence. So, Sonali, would you like to get us started by explaining what punishment is?
Yes. So brace yourselves. This is for the viewers. I'm going to read out the definition of punishment from a paper by Oxley and Holden in 2021. And that says, punishment refers to a response to an undesirable behavior which is intended to be unpleasant in some way and aims to deter the person from repeating the same behavior. So basically, it's a response to a negative behavior, which involves the imposition of an unpleasant stimulus or the removal of a pleasant stimulus.
That was
Does
quite a
that make sense,
mouthful.
Blanka? Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so basically, what you've just said is that it's a response to a negative behavior, right? And then we either take away something or we like give an unpleasant response, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's basically sanctions and consequences of those
Yes. I think
behavior.
those terms can be used interchangeably. I find in today's world,
Yeah.
punishment might not be the word most people use because consequences feel a bit more, not as bad as punishment.
Yeah, it's like sugarcoating the word.
I know, yeah. So, Sonali, can you share some of the most common punitive practices that are present in the classroom and what effects they have on students?
Yes, I would. In fact, it's just unfortunate that students, if you talk to them about school and classrooms, the first thing that comes to their mind is punishment. Oh, I won't do it because I'll be punished. So I'm hoping that one of the oldest punishments that we all know of and is probably not so common anymore anywhere is the practice of the corporal punishment, or in simple words, spanking and patting the child. However, there are a lot of punishments that are still very integral to the education system in classrooms nowadays. One of those tend to be more on the exclusionary side. So, for example, you would have heard of the naughty step or the naughty board, timeouts, detentions, having to stay inside the classroom during break time or lunchtime, or even having to stay back at school for a period of time at the end of the day. So all of these kind of so-called actions are actually excluding the child from a certain activity that they like to be part of. And the other part of these punitive practices falls in the public reprimand space. So instead of excluding the child, you publicly shame the child in front of the entire class with a verbal warning or, red and yellow cards and things like that. What I want to actually mention specifically is whatever category these punishments fall in, or whatever the intent of the teacher is, probably with a good intent, it has been shown with certainty, research has shown it with certainty, that all of these punitive actions result in a negative outcome on the behavior of the child, their academic focus, and their mindset in the long term, like worsening behavior over time. In fact, Blanka, even parents use punishments, isn't it? It's not just limited to classrooms. So, why would you like to share some examples of punishment in home, which I'm sure our viewers have probably are already aware of, but why do parents tend to use them? Let's just do a little bit of self-reflection here.
Yeah, of course. So the common punishments that are used in the home are, you mentioned physical punishment in the forms of spanking and slapping. So I think that is still used in some homes.
Yeah.
Hopefully not as much as it used to be. And then other forms of punishment include giving the cold shoulder, like love withdrawal, the silent treatment, those are very damaging, actually. Other forms of punishment include scolding, yelling, shouting, removing of loved activities or possessions. So I think this is a very common one. Like, okay, if you don't do your homework, you won't be able to play your video game, for example.
Yeah.
I think these are very
True.
commonly used behavior management strategies these days. And the last one I want to touch on are timeouts, which can also be used as a form of punishment. And the reason that parents use these is because they work in the short term. So there is an improvement, like, okay, yeah, they will do anything to play their video game, so they will complete their homework. However, they often backfire and they foster resentment. And ultimately, they teach the kids to develop behaviors to avoid the punishment rather than encourage them to do the right thing, even when no one's looking.
Yeah, but then can you explain a little bit more? Because I've been guilty of doing timeouts with my kid when she was younger, because I was on one hand, I felt, okay, I don't want to hit her. I don't want to associate anything physical about it. But of course, I've given her timeouts when she was much younger, which eventually I realized don't really do the thing, don't give the outcome that we want them to as a parent. So can you explain a little bit more about why timeouts are a form of punishment? They are not really giving us the outcome that we want.
Yeah, so I'm so glad you asked this question because I find there's a lot of misunderstanding around timeouts. And so timeouts were originally introduced into parenting practices in the 60s and 70s as a means of replacing corporal punishment, which is obviously, in that sense, it is a good step forward, right?
Yeah.
But concerns over timeouts as a behavior management strategy often stem from their potential misuse or misunderstanding. And research highlights that while timeouts can serve as a way for children to calm down, their implementation, so the way we do it, plays a very critical role in whether they become harmful or constructive. So when used as a punishment, timeouts risk isolating the child, and they may be perceived as a withdrawal of parental love, and it potentially impacts the child's emotional development and their attachment security. And some researchers actually argue that timeouts can suppress emotions rather than help children learn how to self-regulate. So, for example, if a child is distressed and then you isolate them, it might inadvertently teach them to internalize their emotions rather than to manage them in a healthy way. So for parents, I always suggest to ask yourselves this question: what is my intention by removing the child from the situation? Because if it comes from the intention, the aim to help the child regain calm and emotional regulation, then yes, absolutely do that in a safe way. And what I mean is that in the safe way is that you frame this time as a moment to calm down rather than a form of punishment. So it should be brief, it should be calm, and you need to ensure that you reconnect afterwards. So, and this type of timeout is often referred to as a time in by some researchers, which involves that you are available to the child if they need you. So you are there to guide them through those intense emotions through co-regulation, which basically means that your calm and regulated presence will help the child return to a calm and regulated state. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, so what I'm understanding is instead of saying time out, I'm not going to talk to you, go sit there, or will not talk to you, utilize that time as a parent to calm down yourself and keep it brief. Get control over your emotions because you have a better control than the child. And then once you have calmed down, then you go to the child and tell them this is what happened. Because in the spur of the moment, we just lose control over ourselves. We the volume increases and we show distress or anger, whatever be the reaction that's there. So what I'm getting from that entire conversation is use the time out not to exclude love, but to regain control of your emotions as an adult and give the love back to the child. So the child doesn't look at it
Exactly.
in a negative way.
Exactly.
Interesting.
You said it so beautifully, Sonali. Because yes, parental regulation, like self-regulation, is key. Because if I know it's not always easy to stay calm in the moment. Like if your child is shouting at you and then you're just like chill and calm. Obviously, it's not an easy. It takes practice. But when a child is misbehaving, and we'll go into this in more detail in a bit, we have to explore why that is rather than reacting to the behavior. And with the timeouts or time ins, whatever we want to call them, we want to give them the opportunity to regulate themselves rather than telling them, this is too much for me, I can't deal with this, go away and deal with it by yourself. Because that's basically what timeout does.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost like if we think deeply about this, it's almost like the punishment is actually a reaction of the parent rather than the adult, or not, I shouldn't say parent, it could be any adult, but it's a reaction of the adult rather than actually thinking of what consequence that particular action is going to have on the child. Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, so
Yeah, and in many
actually, before
cases,
move,
sorry, and in many cases, the child doesn't realize what they've done wrong. So it
yeah,
doesn't really teach them,
exactly.
doesn't really teach
Yeah,
them, the actual consequence that you want them to learn
true,
from the situation.
true.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay.
very
So I think
interesting.
we can move on. And
No, actually, Blanka, I'll pause for a moment. And before moving on, I would
yes.
like to discuss the reasons why, why do parents use punishment as a parenting strategy? I would love for you to touch on that. You work with a lot of parents, and I'm sure that every parent is wanting to punish, I mean, thinks of punishment as a way to improve behavior. So why is that? What's the root cause?
Yeah. Yes. That's a very important question, actually, because so using punishment as a means of managing behavior, stems from the approach called behaviorism. And this behaviorism was developed by psychologists like Pavlov, Watson, and Skinner in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And the issue with this approach is that the experiments to support the theory were performed on non-human animals such as dogs, birds, and rats. And they directly assume that humans will respond the same way as animals do. And
I
in
don't feel
addition,
very good about this.
yeah, exactly, right? So first, if you realize this, then you're like, what? Like, we have a higher functioning brain system than any other animal on the planet, right? And in addition, behaviorism is primarily concerned with the observable behavior, so what you actually see, and it doesn't take into account the internal thoughts or the internal bodily state that a person has. And obviously these things motivate behavior, like if a child is constipated, or if they're hungry, or if they had an argument at home in the morning and now they're acting out in school. These things stay with us, and it will influence how we behave.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, it's actually impacting the relationship between the adult and the child. Actually, do
Yeah.
you want to touch upon how it affects the relationship between the child and adult, some of the key ways it impacts?
Yeah, absolutely. So punishment, it damages the relationship, and it can lead to disconnection, and it reduces the child's motivation in doing in behaving well for intrinsic reasons. So they will only behave in a certain way because they want to avoid the punishment. But internally, they might feel disconnected from the parent or the teacher, because many of these apply to teacher-student relationships
Schools.
as well.
Yeah.
So then the other issue is that it doesn't, and I think this is the most important issue, it doesn't address the root cause of the behavior. And I always like to view behavior as a form of communication. It's a symptom, and it is always important to understand the root cause for it. And once we do this, then we actually tackle the problem, and we can come up with solutions on to overcome the issue. But if we don't, then the behavior will be repeated over and over, and it can show up in other areas of life as well.
True.
And the third thing I wanted to mention is that punishment makes kids feel bad, and they internalize this feeling that I'm bad and I deserve punishment. So it's sort of like this self-fulfilling prophecy in the end, and it also triggers shame. So kids feel like they're unworthy and unlovable, which will then it's like it escalates into further misbehavior. So yeah, as I was
I
just
mean, it's
talking.
not just kids, right? It's not just kids. Anybody would feel bad being
Exactly.
punished.
No, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like if you think of yourself in a workplace, like if your boss talks negatively about your work, then you feel bad, you feel ashamed, and it's not a helpful thing for you either,
True.
to be penalized for it, right?
Mm.
So as I was talking, I was thinking that many of these actually are relevant in the school setting, in a
Yeah.
student-teacher relationship. So would you mind talking about how punishment shifts a child's focus away from empathy and towards self-preservation?
Sure. I mean, it's such a depressing topic to be now that we have been talking about punishments for so long. But it is so important that we bring it out in the open and we understand that punishments are not probably the right way as we used to think about it. And as we just discussed, it's not just children. Any person, any individual, you, I, anybody who knows that the consequence of their actions will lead to a punishment, what's the first reaction you have? It's a reaction of fear, of anxiety. And this is just more amplified in children because they can't control their emotions. So what do? They focus on avoiding the negative consequences rather than trying to understand why they're behaving or what's going to happen if they behave in that way. So the only consequence of their action that stays in their mind is the punishment. So in other words, it's kind of it is preventing the child from remorse. It inhibits the remorse and the repair behavior, because when do we remorse, when do we feel bad about having done something? It comes from empathy and fear, which is self-regulation. That's the first thing of humans. Fear prevents the feeling of empathy because survival instinct takes over. So I start focusing on, or the child starts focusing on, how do I avoid that punishment, right? And then what happens? It in turn encourages lying and a sneaky behavior. So on a classroom level, what this would look like is a student starts coming up with excuses for not having done something, or they'll have avoidance behaviors or dishonesty because they just want to avoid getting caught and being punished, rather than realizing that whatever action they are doing, whether it is not completing homework or whether it is stealing somebody else's food, what's the impact of their action? So if they've not done their homework, they are the ones who are going to suffer in the long run. If they've taken food from their friend, the friend is going to go hungry. So that's empathy. And that is that starts to the empathy is completely being avoided here, because you're just trying to survive in a day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so it really like looking at the consequences of one's actions and like and and and
true.
and looking at like understanding how my actions affect other people, right? That you were talking, or even
Yeah,
myself, right? If they don't do their
myself.
homework, then they'll get a bad grade at school, and it's ultimately it's their education. I mean, obviously, we parents, coming from a parent perspective, we do care for that. So we want them to do well, right?
I mean,
So
I'll extend on that one. Like, I've known children who would say, I need to get good marks because my father is going to get angry and hit me, or get angry and not give me so and so. So, what do I do? Instead of trying to study hard, they focus on, okay, can I cheat? That's where cheating starts. Why does it what child want to cheat? It's not that they want to cheat. They are cheating because they're trying to avoid the consequence or the punishment of not getting good grades. It's a
exactly.
classic
So
example.
yeah, so this really nicely ties back into a topic we've already talked about, which is intrinsic motivation, right? That we want
Yeah,
them
yeah, exactly.
to do well for their own good rather than in fear of punishment or in in expectance of a reward. So
True.
in a classroom setting, how can a teacher move away from using punishments in a traditional way, and how can they encourage responsible behavior from students?
So, this is a very interesting question and a very relevant question, because it's not easy. When you have a classroom of, 30 odd kids, 20 odd kids, and you want them all to behave in a certain way, definitely it's not something easy to completely say there will be no consequences of the action. But let me share a very recent incident that happened with one of my students in the recent past, last week, in fact. And then we dwell upon the question that you posed to me. So, this was a classroom of 22 children, and the teacher comes in and the teacher asks, have you done your homework? And the first child says no. So she says, get out of the classroom, stand outside the classroom. She continues to do that for quite a few students. And at the end of the first 10 minutes of the class, 20 out of the 22 children or students are standing outside the classroom. 20 out of 22 children had not done their homework. So they're merrily sitting in the corridor. I don't want to take names, but I was told they were merrily sitting in the class, in the corridor, chatting, while the teacher was there with two students in the class. She could not do what she wanted to do. And now look at this entire scenario. She punished the children to sit outside. What did anyone achieve? Did the students achieve anything? Did the teacher achieve anything? There was no good outcome out of this entire
Yeah.
scenario, right?
Yeah. And what did they learn from this, right? What did the kids learn from this?
That we can. So my student came back and said, we have realized whenever we want a free period, we will make a deal and nobody's going to do any homework. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I mean, they're smarter than we are, right? But,
yeah,
jokes
totally.
aside, jokes aside, I was just thinking to myself, if the teacher had then, instead of just sending them out of the classroom, done a little bit of self-reflection as a teacher, that was my communication with the children, right? She could have probably moved more towards a collaborative problem solving, where the problem was no homework done, and then ask the children, did you not understand what was meant to do? Because if there's a few of them who did not do it, I can understand. But if 20 out of 22 children have not done the homework, maybe the information was not given to the children correctly.
Mm.
Maybe the children found the homework too difficult to do. So, what I feel is, instead of punishments, if as educators in the classroom, we tend more towards a collaborative problem solving, then the children feel the onus of working towards solving that problem rather than thinking of or trying to avoid that situation. They're
Mm.
more open to, they feel responsible for their actions. And it all brings us back to always the growth mindset, right?
Mm.
So, in fact, would you like to? So, this is in a
So how
classic.
would sorry, before we move on,
Mhm.
could you elaborate on like how would you do the problem solving with the student?
So, Sure. So, like, for example, this was on one case. There's something happened yesterday, in fact, in one of the classes I was taking, and the students just could not solve any of the problems. So I said, okay, I usually don't give homework, but I'm going to give you 3 or 4 problems that I would love for you to do. And as usual, when you have a group of kids, one of them said, Mama, I don't want to. And I said, that's perfectly all right. You don't want to. But as young adults, I'm sure you know what the consequence of not doing this would be, because we know where we are as a class. Where do we stand as a class? So you don't want to do it, that's fine. Then you tell me, how are you going to understand this topic without doing the worksheet? So
Mm-hmm.
it becomes more of a conversation, more of a mutual respect in the conversation where we are trying to solve that problem. So it is again coming back to what you mentioned earlier, identify the root cause of the behavior. So in this case, the root cause of the behavior is I do not understand. And then you start from there and try to solve it together as a team rather than as a dictator who says this is how it should be solved.
Yeah, so it's more of a collaborative approach, as you were saying, rather than a top-down,
Yes.
me enforcing the rule
Yes.
on the child as
Yes.
an adult.
I
Yeah.
said so.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
said so.
yeah.
In fact,
I like that. Yeah. Thank you.
yeah. So, thanks for that. I mean, I hope that was useful. Um, can you share some? So, this is in a classroom, and this is what I always tell the teachers, that instead of being the authority, become a team. And you will be
Yeah.
able to solve better. And since you work so much with parents, can you share some similar practical approaches that parents can use at home?
Yeah, absolutely. So I also agree with the team approach. So I think as parents, we want to be more as mentors rather than controllers. So we want to be like a coach to our kids, right? And for this, I think adopting and embracing this mindset of every child is good and wants to do good is very helpful. And this is what I always tell my clients is that you need to see the good in your child even when they misbehave. And
Yeah.
we need to get curious. So I always tell them we need to turn ourselves into detectives and ask questions like, why did this behavior happen? Why now?
Yeah.
What happened before? Like, are there any underlying stressors? Are they hungry? Are they constipated? Are they emotionally drained from a difficult day in school and are looking for a way of releasing and they just can't find a healthy way of doing that?
Just find
Or
what is causing that behavior, because no child wants to misbehave.
exactly. So adopting this mindset that my child is good and they're misbehaving because there's something going on. And then we talked about this earlier about regulating ourselves because it is hard. It's hard for parents. It isn't easy to feel love and forgiving towards someone who is just yelling at us, right? And I admit that's tricky. It's tricky for me too. Like when my kids come home and they yell at me and they hit me and all that. So take a moment and practice some self-compassion and self-love. And then you're ready to focus on repair. So once everyone's regulated, you focus on repair. You tell them that I know you're a good kid. I know that you know that it isn't okay to hit your brother or to yell at me. And everyone makes mistakes, and that's okay. What can we do? So we move on together. We shift the energy together, and we focus on, okay, this has happened. Okay, we move on, and now we focus on the other thing and ask questions like, what's going on? Is there anything I can do to help? Do you need to offload anything? Be there for them, be present, and you don't need to solve anything, fix anything in the moment. Ask permission to do that. Like, do you want me to
Yeah,
help
take
with
your
this?
time. Take your
Yeah,
time to
exactly.
cool down. And I'm like, it's a two-step process, right? First, control yourself before you start responding immediately. So regulate and focus on repair. Don't just rush into giving a response,
No,
but the child may not even realize what mistake they made.
no,
So
sometimes they're not aware. Like, they might just feel like, there's some tension going on and I just need to release it somehow. And obviously not yelling isn't the way to do it, but they might not,
yeah.
maybe haven't learned any tools yet. So that's why we're doing it together. Yeah,
And
just in
isn't
the
it
interest
this
of
what we
time.
discussed last time, that they start internalizing the response when they
Yeah.
don't understand the reason for the response?
Exactly. Yes. And then again, they internalize that I'm bad. because I need to be yelled at because I'm bad.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Okay, so I think we're running out of time, and I really want to take time for listener questions if there are any. So do start putting them in the chat if you've got any questions. In the meantime, I'll just wrap up with some closing thoughts. And I wanted to say that we really want to encourage intrinsic motivation. So going back to that, we know that kids want to do well, and they will do good if they can. And when we encourage intrinsic motivation in our kids, it means that we're fostering environments where they feel supported to make mistakes and repair them without fear.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's not about raising rule followers or robots who do what you ask them to do. It's about nurturing a child who ends up growing up to be a resilient and an empathetic individual. It's all about connecting and building a relationship. And, I keep saying this to my child, and I would say this to all the parents, educators, teachers. To get respect, you have to give respect, not punishments.
Yeah,
it does
that's
not
beautiful.
work.
Yes, thank you. That's beautiful.
So we end with that, and I invite the audience to please put in their questions if they have any. I know we have run. I did not realize that it's already been half an hour, but if you have questions, Blanka, and I would love to answer those, please put them in the chat box. I see Jasmine, I see Sukumar Rangachari sir saying punishment in absence of response makes the child to wonder why he or she is not being punished. That's true. And
yeah,
there
I
should
think
not,
it's so
love
engraved
withdrawal.
in society that you're always going to have a reprimand on your actions. I think, that's why we need to collectively move away from it. Thank you, Sukumar, and thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Yes, it does work well with adults. It works well with anyone.
True.
Yes. So
Yes.
Okay, Sonali, do you want to announce next month's topic?
Yes. I would love to do that. Next month's topic being the Christmas month. We're going to do something really useful because I think that's the month of indulgence. So next month we are going to talk about on the topic of setting boundaries and how to say no without conflict. What are the strategies that we can use as parents and adults to say no without conflict, and where to set boundaries? But before all of you log off, Blanka and I have an exciting announcement to make. So Blanka, would you do the honors of sharing it with our viewers?
Yes. So we are very happy to announce that Nurturing Minds is now on YouTube. So we have a YouTube channel. Yes. So do go and search for us there. We'll share a link to this post. And support us there, and we'll upload all the videos, all the recordings of these conversations there. So if you haven't managed to join us live, then you can always catch up there as well. Thank you.
As a true YouTube owner, I will just add one line. As a true YouTube channel owner, which although neither of us are very good YouTube, social media savvy people,
we're improving.
We are improving. So like us, follow us, and most importantly, if there is a topic that you would love for us to cover in this series, please do that. We will do the research and we'll get back to you with science-backed approaches and solutions that are there to tackle that topic.
Yes, so you can do that either on YouTube, or you can send either Sonali or myself a message on LinkedIn. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. It was nice talking to you, Sonali. Bye.
Same here. Bye-bye.